Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Mirror podcast. I'm your host, Kyle David. If you didn't know, now you know. Back with episode 100 something. I've lost count. Today, I got a special guest, man. This is somebody that I'm excited to have on. I'm really pumped to have this guy on. We actually went to the same high school. Never really knew each other, but we went to the same high school, grew up in the same town, FOCO, shout out to Fort Collins. And it's just cool how our paths have crossed back because of social media, because of the internet. We've got to connect, and I've kind of watched his journey a little bit, and I'm not going to say too much. I'm going to let him talk a little bit, but he's an entrepreneur. He's a businessman. He's an inspiration. He's somebody that I think is going to give a lot of value to all of you and to me. So without further ado, my boy, Zack Milewski. Zack, thanks for being on, man.
Kyle, man, I appreciate it, man. I've been seeing what you've been doing, and I really admire it. The fact that you can, deliver so consistently, time and time again, I think it's awesome. Yeah.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Well, now it's time to pass the ball to you, man. Kind of give us, I know we talked a little bit before this, but kind of give us like, a brief kind of origin story of who you are, where you came from, how we got here.
Sure thing. So, Fort Collins, born and raised, so small town. My parents, they started a paving company when I was really young. So I was, just born or something. And so I remember from, really early ages, what it was like for them, kind of starting their business. And, I remember, the early days were kind of the tough days for our family. So very humble beginnings, very, very humble beginnings. And, I kind of watched them grow this small little family business into a little bit more of a well-oiled machine as I got older and older. And so, we moved from Fort Collins out to Bellevue. So we went from a small town to like very, very rural small town.
Shout out to Bellevue.
Shout out to Bellevue. We had alpacas. We had an alpaca ranch.
Come on.
And yeah, man, I know. So they ended up asphalt, getting into like alpacas, kind of like a small little ranch. And growing up, I remember them just working their butts off. It was a lot of work to see kind of like how they did things, what they did along the way. And it gave me a lot of perspective on what it takes to kind of make something grow from nothing, so to speak. So we very humble beginnings, kind of grew into like I said, a better family business. And then eventually they started doing pretty well for themselves. So, as I'm getting into high school, they're starting to do better and better. And, at that point, my parents were like, hey, I'm around 16 years old at that point, they're like, hey, what do you plan on doing on the summers? I'm like, I don't know, skateboarding, ride motocross. Like, they're like, no, they chilling. They're like, no, you're not going to do that this summer. So, they ended up helping me start a striping company. So 16 years old, I'm striping parking lots for them behind their work that they're paving and seal coating and stuff like that. So it wasn't the easiest thing. So, I think in hindsight, everything, they're like, oh, this is going to go one way, and it kind of goes another way. So they bought a small business from this gentleman, and he worked with me all summer, kind of getting me trained up on how to stripe parking lots, what you got to do to maintain things, all that good stuff. So I became a business owner at a very young age, and kind of got I was spoon fed work, right? So I was a little I was blessed. It was a blessing and a curse. I know my parents wanted to do what was best for me and help me get a leg up. But, when you're given things like, hey, here's all these contracts and you get to just keep getting them, you kind of forget what it's like. You kind of skip the hardship piece of it. Right. And so, fast forward a couple years later, I'm getting through high school. I've got friends striping with me after school and on the weekends, stuff like that. And I end up leaving the house at a pretty young age. So like 17 and a half. My dad and I were kind of tussling, here and there. And as a teenager, you think you know better than your parents do, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So we were tussling and I'm thinking like, well, I'm making enough money. I'm just gonna go off and do this on my own. And life kind of slaps you in the face at that point. You get a reality check. So I during that time I meet a girl at the Greeley Stampede. And
Shout out to the Greeley Stampede.
oh my
Pause for a second.
gosh.
Come on.
Right?
Anybody in the northern Colorado region knows about the Greeley Stampede. That thing is a staple of culture. Okay.
It is a staple. It is a staple. Oh my gosh. So I'm over there at the Greeley Stampede and I'm with my buddies. We just got done working. We go over there and I see this girl and I'm like, man, she's pretty. And my buddy who's working with me, and he's like, oh dude, he's like, I know her. He's like, and her cousins are like badasses. He's like, I wouldn't even talk to her. He's like, don't talk to her. I'm like, I have to go say hi. So end up running over there to her, kind of like talking to her and getting her number. And what ends up happening is, her and I start dating. And, I end up moving to Greeley to continue seeing her, end up having kids, very young age. And, I'm 19 years old at this point, and I find out that I'm going to be a father, turning 20. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to get my stuff together, like on another level. So, do that, have kids, all that stuff. And I start hitting some turbulence with business. So, had a pretty nice couple of contracts from a company. This is 2008, 2009-ish, kind of right when the recession was hitting. And the company that I was doing business for at the time said, he was like, listen, I flew all the way in here. We don't do deposits on these projects, but this is the biggest job I was going to get up to this point in my career. And what happens ultimately is we do the work, they don't pay. It ends up flipping me on my butt. Another year and a half, 2 years later, I'm filing bankruptcy and chapter 7. So I'm like not in a very good place at all. Having to restart the company all over again with no capital, no credit, no nothing. And at this point, like I've gotten into a little bit of some trouble along the way, right? So I'm in trouble with my driver's license, just filed bankruptcy. I've got a daughter, and I'm just in a mess. And so end up kind of like lining a bunch of work up, right? So I've got these few contracts and I'm like, all right, how do I make this work? And, I'm just always like pulling money from here to there, like robbing Peter to pay Paul, it feels like. And as I'm getting through this stuff, like lo and behold, my dad calls me, and he and I haven't really spoke a whole lot in the last couple of years. He's like, hey, how are you liking your business? I'm like, this is miserable. This is really, really tough. And he's like, hey, I've got an opportunity. My business is about to get bought out. Do you want to come to work for them? And I'm like, yes, I do. Please, please, please. Like, give me another chance, And I'm like, it goes to show, like the parents' love for their child, right? It's like, you can push them away and push them away and push them away. And then they'll still come back and draw you back in. And it's like chance and chance and chance again. So, I end up going to work for this company and filed bankruptcy prior. So I'm like trying to rebuild my credit. End up realizing that I'm going to have my son at that point too. So, the kid's mom and I had been on and off. Still end up having Brandon. And the business that I went to work for, they're a large corporation out of the Midwest. Basically, for somebody who never went to college, doesn't have any sort of like student background in terms of like college career, those guys were my college, man. I mean, like going to work for them, my bosses, I just was trying to sponge off of them. Anything that they would let me, I would ask questions just nonstop. Why do you do this? How do you do this? Why do you want to do this? And they just taught me the cost of doing business, the real cost of doing business, budgets, employees, but more than anything, culture. Like they taught me the importance of culture. So, my family did a great job of teaching us how to do the work, and not that they didn't do business well, but these guys, I mean, they're a big corporation. And so they were doing things right. I learned things to another level with them. I owe that company a lot of gratitude. They took a chance on me for sure, because at the time I didn't even have a driver's license. And I'm like, you guys, oh dude, it was the worst, man. Like it was the worst. I have a driver's license. I'm like, hey, can you guys hire me? I'll drive my own vehicle. Just put me on over here. You guys don't have to do this. And they're like, I'm going to turn my head. Just do what you got to do. I end up going through and opening up a bunch of old tickets, getting them expunged, get my driver's license back within a year. Credit's starting to go again, starting to make money. And then another year later, I'm buying a house, and things just really start to turn for you at that point. Once you start building energy, it's easy to kind of like compound off of it, right?
Right.
So the energy's moving at that point. We fast forward a little bit further, and things start to change with the corporation I'm working for. They're changing business models and really how I'm going to be doing work. And at that point, I'm several years in at this point, and probably one of their better salesmen. And I just told them, I'm like, hey, you guys, like, thank you so much. I appreciate it, but I think I'm going to jump off and do my own thing. So at the time, my mom was ready to open up a business. And so she had done the paving business before. Her and I had talked about it, and we kind of, we veer off and we start a business. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm in a hotel.
You're good.
Knocking.
You're good.
Knocking. Give me housekeeping.
If you're listening or watching at this point, like, this is authentic. This is why, as I always talk about, this podcast is real. Like, this is not about scripts or anything. This is about having real conversations, and there's real interruptions in life, and that's how life works. And he's back, but that's my plug right there. Authentic conversations. Sometimes things happen, but yeah, keep going, man. So you start. Is National Pavement Partners the company you and your mom start?
Yep.
Okay.
So we start National Pavement Partners, and it's out of thin air, man. Like, and I mean out of thin air. So I leave in end of June, and I know, I'm like, okay, my mom is pretty much putting her life savings into what we're about to do. I just bought a house. I've got another new baby on the way, or just got there, and I'm kind of freaking out. I'm like, okay, I think I can do this, but I don't know if I can do this. We spend all weekend just streamlining, brainstorming, get a pop-up splash website put together. I get emails put together. I put the whole model of the business together. And I'm not even kidding you. It was a long weekend. I think it was like 4th of July weekend of 2015. We just all weekend, nose to the grindstone. Monday comes up, and I'm like, all right, here's the plan. I'm going to get my customers an email blast. We're going to send an email blast. I want to see like if people respond to it. And, to this day, man, like, hand to God, man, it was the best email blast campaign that we still have even had to this day, no matter how big we've gotten. And I'm like, thank you, God. Like, we got so much response from it, like the Denver Broncos. Yeah, man, Flatirons Mall, like all these great contracts, people that weren't even responding before, started responding. And I was playing a different role at the time. Like, I didn't want anyone to know I was the owner. I didn't want them to know I was behind it. Just told them I was, another salesman in the same position as I was, just switched companies. And what that did for them is, I think, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but to me, I was like, I'm still kind of young. I don't want these people thinking that they're handing over all these huge contracts into my hands. And
Mhm.
it felt like it gave them a sense of security. So I played that role for a few years, didn't tell anybody. I
Were
didn't
you
want to tell anybody.
operating though? Were you operating the whole business at the time?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And so I was like pawning things off. I would be talking to a customer, and they'd
What a
say, "Well,
guy.
can you give me a discount?" And I'm like, let me talk to my boss and I'll see. And I give him a call back and I'm like, we're not
Come on.
supposed to, but he said he'd wiggle a little bit, and so you play
Mm,
that back and forth for just a little while and
sure.
I needed to do that because I needed to get a feel for what was going to work. I didn't, again, I got my mom's stuff on the line, I got mine on the line, and I'm like, I got to make sure that we're staying safe along the way because I failed at this before. I failed
Mhm.
miserably, and so we're taking risks, but we're taking calculated risks along the
Mhm.
way. And it just starts compounding and growing bigger and bigger and bigger. One of the ways that we wanted to differentiate ourselves was we wanted to provide value to our clients that is beyond just paving a parking
Mm.
lot. So what we were doing to provide value was we're taking pictures before, during, and after, and we were sending them pictures and videos through email nonstop. And customers were
Smart.
eating that stuff up. They were,
Super
man.
smart.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. They really enjoyed it. They liked it, and it got to a point where that, as our business kept growing, um, we doubled, tripled, doubled, and we're very, very fortunate to be able to do that in the short time frame that we did. We started realizing like, okay, this is getting hard to scale. This business model is getting hard to scale. So at the time, a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, my sales manager and I were like, how do we make this faster? We got to get this done a lot faster. So like, well, let's build an app that we can
Mm.
estimate from our phone. We can measure from our phone. We can take the pictures and they geographically tag themselves back into the locations of where our repairs are. And then on the backside, our crews can log in and upload the pictures along the way. So we can see where they're at on site and take the pictures. So that's where SpotOnSite comes in.
Yeah, bro. That's
Yeah.
smart. I see
Thanks,
that.
man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm all about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, that pretty much brings us up to current, man,
Mhm.
minus some details here and there, but that's the quick 10,000-foot view.
Bro, I love it. I
Yeah.
love that because you get to a point, like, I think anybody gets to a point, whether it's in their personal life or in business, where they go, what I did to get to here isn't going to get me to here. And how do what's the, like you said, the differentiating factor that takes me from here to here? And you have to be creative. And I think leveraging technology in that way. I mean, this is the age of technology, man. So like, I love though
Amen,
that you
brother.
started it in just a raw, gritty way of like, we're just gonna email them pictures and videos. I'm like, yeah, yeah. Like,
Yes.
do what you can, right? Like whatever you can to provide value to people.
Whatever
I
you
love
can.
that.
Whatever you can, man. And, like, sometimes it was like, I think people, like, I swear, I think some customers probably felt bad for how much work we put into their stuff. And they're like, you can just have this job. Like, you've done so much work. Like, they probably felt guilty, but it goes to show we held up on our end and we tried to do our best on, everything that we did. So here we are, man.
Come
So
on. First of all,
yeah,
congrats on your success, man. Like I know that it's not, success is not a linear thing usually, right? It's up and down and all around. I do want to ask you a question though. So, right, you went bankrupt. You have no driver's license. You're in the hole. You're probably in debt. I'm assuming. And then you go to start the company again. Like, what makes you not go work for somebody and not just get a 9 to 5? Like, what's the thing? Have you always had that tick or the entrepreneurial tick? Or why did you decide I'm going to do this again? Right? Because that defeatist mindset of this didn't work, I failed, I'm no good, I can't do this. That's a lot of people, right? Like a lot of people deal with that internal voice of like, once you fail, you're a failure, you can't do it. What was it for you that you were like, no, 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 I'm gonna go after it again?
you know, it for me, it's fortunately, unfortunately, I cared what people thought of me.
Hmm.
I left some people hanging on the first one, some suppliers, some people that I wasn't very proud of, and I wanted to make it right with them. And so, I just told them, yeah, give me one more chance, give me one more chance, let me try this one more time. And, I'm like, if anyone's going to pay for it, it's going to be me.
Hmm.
And it's going to be in a different way. Like if I'm going to rob from anybody, it's going to be from myself. And so if I got to work myself into the ground, I'm going to work myself into the ground. And like, if you know me long enough, I'm a very competitive person. Like no matter what it is, man, if we're eating breakfast together and you're like, who's going to eat this first? I'm like, that's how it's going. Like if we're running, I'm like, I'm not even a runner, but I'm like, I will do my best. I'm just a very ultra competitive person. And I think the competitive side in me just, was like, no, I gotta do this. I gotta figure out how to do this and make it right. And it's tough, man. I'm not saying it was easy. It is not. It's mentally exhausting. It's physically exhausting, but one foot in front of the other and you end up in a different place,
Mm-hmm. I love that you talked about when you said at the beginning, like the compound, how energy and momentum compounds, right? Like you said, you went from here to here in 1 year, from bankruptcy to then house, driver's license, credit repaired. Like talk about that for a minute. Like what you've experienced as far as like not that there's tips and tricks, but things that you have implemented, maybe even like daily habits or mental habits, or what are the things that you found that are helpful when trying to compound energy and build momentum, especially when you're starting from zero? Like, what are the things that you found that have been helpful?
Great question. So I struggle with some anxiety and some depression to some degree. So when things are off, they're way off. And when you're low, you're low.
Mm-hmm.
What I started realizing was routine and structure was the best thing to build confidence.
Hmm.
Set your alarm at a certain time each day. You're going to do it X amount of days per week. You do that. You make that promise to yourself. You don't break it. Okay, well, great. Now you've got that done. Now you're making sure that you're hitting the gym this many times per week. You don't break that promise to yourself. You got to learn to start to trust yourself. And the way you do that, once you start trusting yourself, you're able to start building energy again.
Hmm.
And, like you start seeing those little wins and they start chalking up and you're like, wow, I'm actually doing good. Wow, I'm actually, things are happening. It just, the momentum starts to build off of the little wins. It's not the big wins.
Hmm.
It's you look back and you're like, oh wow, those were some big wins along the way. Instead of you know, I gotta have this right now. Just doesn't happen that way. Just doesn't happen that way.
I love that you said that. You said, right, you have to learn to trust yourself. And the only way you learn to trust yourself is by keeping the promises to yourself. You ever follow Ed Milet? I'm sure you know Ed Milet.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Ed's awesome, man.
I hear him talk about that a lot, about keeping the promises to yourself, about making promises to yourself and keeping promises to yourself. Like you said, whether it's I'm going to get up, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm just going to do these things today. What do you think about, like, I'm sure you've experienced this, especially as somebody, I also dealt with some anxiety and depression about having to pull myself back. Especially I had some years in addiction where I was just off the rails. But learning how to just that idea of one day at a time and being able to pull yourself just back into the present. Is that something that you've had to deal with, or that you've learned, or that you've implemented, or that you think is helpful at all? What's your experience with that?
Yes, man. I mean, you gotta pull yourself into present. I'm a very heady person, so I can, and I'm a visionary too. So I'm always thinking, and it's a blessing and a curse, a double-sided sword, man. It can get you far, but it'll also pull you away too. You got to remember to like reground yourself. So like meditation has been a big piece of what I do. And I'm not ultra consistent with it right now. But as I have, been able to get into it at times, like it's been a great way for me to bring my focus back in. And when I feel like I'm starting to get off focus, it reminds me to be mindful of like where I'm at, the here and now type of thing. But yeah, always considering there's a greater plan to like, does this matter today? Yeah, it matters today, but is it going to matter, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now? No, it's not. And so like, what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is here. So don't let this, detour you.
That's huge. What you just said is huge. I hope
Thanks.
anyone listening or watching, like let that sink in. What he just said. It may matter now, but is that going to matter in 6 months or 5 years? Like we spend so much time on things that are real. Like we have emotions in the moment of anxiety or fear or worry or whatever that is, but realizing that it's not going to matter down the road. And so try to implement things, meditation or whatever, some practices to, like you said, reground yourself and realize, hey, my emotions may be spiking right now, but what I'm feeling isn't actually something that's going to provide positive outcomes in the future. You're dropping some wisdom here, bro. I want to hone in on that. Yeah.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. We've got a team of estimators here, and a lot of them are built from the ground up, man. They came from the field. A couple of them one of them came from Lifetime. He was selling gym memberships, and I was trying to tell him, like, listen, you guys, you can make good money if we do this the right way. And, selling anything is not easy. What we're into as well, it's a longer life cycle for a sale. And, these guys, I tell them, I'm like, it's exciting at the beginning because you're doing something new, but you got to hang on to it because, the life cycle of a deal for us is 90 to 120 days, 3 to 4 months, and you're grinding, but you got to trust the process. Like if you trust the process, it all comes full circle. And I can see it on their face almost. You can almost tell exactly when they're starting to go through it. And I got to remind them, like, hey, man, remember what I told you at the very beginning? Got to trust that process because like it works. And then a month later, it's like just the law of the universe. 2 months later, you can't do the right thing so many times and get the wrong result. It's just impossible, right? So
that's a word, bro. That's a wise word. You can't do the right thing over and over and get the wrong thing. It's a bomb. Hey, I know that it's been an hour and you probably got to go here, but last kind of question. I could ask you a million questions and hopefully we can link up again. But last kind of question, like this is maybe a high level question, but there's a lot of people out there. I see it all the time on social media and just, I know it, man. There's people that, and we kind of talked about this on the phone yesterday. There's people that want to be, maybe we didn't talk about this. I talked with someone about this. There's people out there that want to be put in the game, especially younger people, our generation or younger. They want to be put in the game. They want to win. They want to succeed in life, but they don't really know what to do. Whether like people like you that are visionaries, there's a lot of young people that are like, I have this thing in me, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't know where to put it. Does that make sense? What would you say to those people that are like the younger version of you? And they're like, I have this drive, this grit, and I just don't know what to do with it, but I want to be successful. What do you tell those people?
Yeah. Tap into somebody who is doing something that you want to be doing. Grab them. Mentors, one thing I've noticed is like mentors, they don't mind helping people if you want to help yourself. There's so many clients I had along the way that I was like, hey, how did you guys do this? What do you do this? Why do you do this? And, I could have been the pesky kid, but they're happy to help. And never did they ever tell me to, leave them alone or that I was bugging them. In fact, I owe a lot of gratitude to those people along the way. It's don't be afraid to ask the people for help. If you see somebody that you admire, that you aspire to be, I would absolutely contact them and just say, hey, I like what you're doing. How are you doing it? I've got this idea in mind, but like, what do you think of it? And get some feedback from some professionals that have some years behind them and see what they tell you.
That's a wise word, man. Thanks for taking the time to do this, man. I know you're a busy guy and you have a family and you have a business. So I appreciate you taking an hour to talk to this guy down here in Dallas, Texas, man. I appreciate that.
I really appreciate you having me, man. It's been a pleasure,
man. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, let's stay connected, man. Thanks for being on here.
You
Thank
got
you
it.
guys for listening. This is another episode of Inside the Mirror podcast. I'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, peace and blessings. Later, my friend.
Peace. Bye.